So for all of you who are watching, the next session is actually a master class that is with Alvanon team. I'm going to take this chance to invite Christina, Elizabeth, and Kimberly onto the stage. One of the most important things that we actually find is that we keep getting asked by a lot of people, which software should we use? Or how do they differ? Or, well, what things are good about it? What's not good about it? Or, and you know what? We always say it depends really on the use case that you're actually doing. But one of the big things that actually happened was there's a lot of stuff that is about expectation. And if we hadn't done something to create ground truth, we wouldn't be able to show you this. And so what Kimberly, Elizabeth, and Christina spent months actually doing, and also making up a physical sample and sending it to Hong Kong, getting it photographed, sending it back, we actually tried to establish ground truth. So with that, I hope that you'll stay for the next 45 minutes and listen to all of the learnings that we've actually had. And Chris, Elizabeth, and Kimberly, take it away.
Thanks, Janice. Thank you. Okay, let me share my screen. Let me know when it's visible there. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Liz. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I really hope you've been enjoying the 3D Tech Festival so far. It's been fantastic to see the global reach. I mean, there's been so much great information and we're just super excited to be a part of it and be here. My name is Chris Onusko, as Janice just introduced me, and I am the Director for Blocks and Grading Services. And with me are Kim Wick. And you want to wave? Say hello. And Liz Maginot, and both are technical consultants on the block and grading services team here at Alvanon. Kim, Liz, and I are here to share an exercise that we did born out of our own day-to-day work of using 3D in our process for block development. And as many of you may know, for us at Alvanon, standards and tools are key tenets in what we do. And our team spends a lot of time in the weeds every day, and we love it, right, guys?
Oh yeah,
so,
yes we do.
This is a technical session, excuse me. This is indeed a technical session, and we're focusing not only on using standards tools at the core for 3D design development, but also in calibrating in 3D for consistency between users and teams, because it's important to bridge the digital work and the physical outcome. Now, we're all three of us are pattern makers. We've been using 2D CAD pattern making for years, and now fully immersing into integrating 3D into our work process. None of us consider ourselves super users, but we are in 3D on a daily basis. And Kim and Liz especially, both are very proficient in 3D above an intermediate level. We also have the great fortune of working in Browseware, Clo, and OPTITEX. And all three were used in this exercise that we're going to present today. And that's because we want to get a picture of working in all three of those. Some days you think working between centimeters and inches is hard. Going in and out of all those systems can have their challenges too, right? We know that 3D is an amazing tool and it's continually being adapted to meet the needs of users. And we've seen so much of that over the last 2 days. It's especially exciting in driving efficiency and sustainability. And with that, it can also be quite complicated. So there's a lot that goes into the process of working in 3D and with so many different end uses. But really the end goal is still to create a garment and fit consistency that meets the customer's expectations. Today, it isn't possible to have a 3D pattern maker who doesn't understand the 2D elements of pattern development for bulk production. And that is an important piece of that critical bridge between the digital work and the physical outcome. One of the questions we have asked ourselves and still do is, can I trust what I see in 3D? Establishing guidelines to calibrate users can help get past that mistrust while promoting consistency and efficiency. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So this brings us to the exercise and style development that we're sharing. It includes using standard tools to calibrate the process for the purpose of trusting that what we see in 3D accurately represents the physical garment, with the goal being to create 3D validated assets for efficiency in process and consistency and fit. So the style that we're going for is a dress. And the virtual alba forms that you'll be seeing throughout the presentation are actually the Alvanon Standard Series European LTA women. Okay, so Liz, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Great. So as Chris mentioned, we're using the Alvanon Standard European LTA 38 women's core as our body. And we're just going to show you a little demo here for our design process that we chose to use. And we decided to kind of go with starting from the avatar as a blank canvas. We just felt like it was really great to use the 3D tools available within Clo as our starting point. So Chris, if you would hit play, we'll watch the demo. This is a demo of the 3D avatar pen tool. And as I'm drawing on the avatar, I'm making the shapes that I'm envisioning in my mind. So it's a really great tool just to draw on a blank canvas. And I'm drawing the back bodice here, getting the shapes that I'm really going for. And it has some editing functions along the way too. And then this is the flattening process where you can click through those shapes that you've just drawn. And the software does a pretty great job of producing a shape that you can use as a starting point for a pattern. So I'm arranging the patterns in the workspace of the 2D area just based on how they're going to sew together. And you'll see there are some areas where the pattern shape might be a little abstract or curved. You don't have to adjust these areas, but I am going to go through and kind of finesse a few of these points. Using the 2D adjustment tools, there's multiple options. You can edit the curvatures, delete points. And the great part about this is that every adjustment that you make in the 2D window is also reflected in real time in the 3D window. So you can see kind of as I'm curving, it'll adjust that portion there, which is really neat, especially if you're adjusting big style line positions or hem lengths. It gives you a great visual right in real time of what you're doing. So here I'm going to create a mirror, a back symmetry panel, and I'm also going to be copying and creating a symmetry for the front bodice pieces as well. This is really helpful so that down the line, any edit I make to one side of the body will automatically be reflected on the other side. So they're matched to be mirrored. And here I'm going to be shifting that newly created bodice piece into place, since it kind of was up in the space there, and just shifting it around to a good position, making sure it's not colliding with the body, and shifting the back bodice panel into place and the back princess panel. And that was just a little glimpse of that design process that we use. And from here, you would continue on with sewing and simulating and dressing, and we have more videos for you later on. And after a few more tweaks, we ended up with this as our North Star for our design visual. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the 2D pattern. That pattern was exported directly out of Clo. And we reference both of these items throughout the rest of the process. And the really big question here is, how do we calibrate from here? Our goal is repeatable fit consistency. And passing it off to Chris, she's going to walk you through a little bit more on that topic.
Yeah, thanks so much, Liz. So, we have the design concept in front of us. So now we're thinking about, what is the best starting point so we know we can get to the best fit possible, the immediate things we're going to think about. So the first thing when we start to think about getting into the best fit is we're going to certainly reference the most appropriate block that's mapped to the fit standards. So this is what we're seeing here is the physical sample that has been validated for the block for the LTA women's size 38 core size. And then we see the 3D renderings of it on either side. So we're starting from an authentic validated point. And, our practice is, and our belief is that starting from a block mapped to the fit standard absolutely is the most ideal and the correct approach. But we also recognize that brands all have a different approach as to what they may see as a block, what their best start fit point might look like. Whatever it is, it's important that it's used with consistency and clear communication. So this is the first tool that we're choosing in order to carry this process through. Now the next thing that we want to talk about is the logical thing that we're going to think about is fabric. And I'm going to turn it over to Kim so that she can give us a little bit more about how we approach that.
Sure. Well, it's important for what you see in 3D to be as close to what that physical sample is going to be. So there are some great fabric libraries in all three softwares that we used, but we decided to start with the actual fabric. So we sent the fabric out to be tested to 3 different resources. We sent them to Browseware, to OPTITEX, and then to Vizoo. And what we had tested was the main dress fabric, the contrast fabric, and then we also had tested the main dress fabric and contrast fabric with interlining applied to it, because that's what's going into the dress. What you see on the screen here is just screenshots of the different physics screens in all 3 softwares. Here you see some of the fabric testing results that we got back. This is an example of fabric that was tested by 2 different resources, and it's used in the same software. So we simulated the dress, and you can clearly see, if you look at the image on the right, the thickness of the fabric and the mass is definitely different. So, you know, as a result of this, we realized that, you know, sending fabric out, there's going to be some variables in there.
Yeah, really good
and it's
point.
not always going to, you know, yield the same results.
Yeah, really, really good point, Kim. Let's take a look at what happens when we look at all 3 of those fabrics here. Oh, you're on mute, Liz. There you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. So here's a great page just showing all of the different results that we received. And it's a good example of the same fabric that was tested by 3 different providers. In Browseware on the left, you can see this was one fabric that was tested by 2 different providers. And then we also had Vizoo test fabric for Browseware and Clo. So you kind of have that representation there as well, and OPTITEX. It's just a nice page to see all of the results together.
Yeah, not only are we seeing the differences in the fabric testing, but then you're seeing the differences in the different softwares as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all really important. And, you know, we certainly recognize there's a lot of fabric resources, different libraries that could choose from. We chose to select the fabric and then have it tested so we could also assess this part of working in 3D as well in virtual fabrics. Thanks, guys. All right, so let's take a look. We have our fabric now. We know what the expectation of that. We have our design concept. We have the block that we've chosen. So this is kind of our starting point that maps back to our FIP standards. So now we're just going to take a look at how we chose to adapt the block to get to the style. And so, Kim, you want to walk us through the next steps here?
Yes, I can. So we're starting with our validated block of the Empire dress. And the first thing I did was adjust it for the amount of stretch in the fabric that we're going to use in our 3D dress. So that was adjusted. And then I simulated it in 3D so that I could test the fit in the new fabric. And what we're looking at is an opaque and a transparent view of this adjusted block. And the reason why we're looking at the transparent view is so that we can see the balance lines on the block and to make sure that they're still mapping back to that ELVA form. So this really developed, you know, another block that we can easily add to our block library. So if we wanted to use this to develop more dresses in a knit, we certainly could.
Yeah, so Kim, did you choose to do these pattern adjustments in the 2D software, or did you do it in 3D?
I did it in the 2D software. Yeah, I did you know, I calculated the differences and I determined how much it needed to be reduced in circumference. And at this point, I'm really only reducing it in circumference. In the next slide, we'll talk about length differences. but the pattern adjustments were done in 2D and then
Okay.
the 3D simulations. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And we know that if someone chooses, they could work in 3D,
Yes,
you know,
certainly.
depending on their skill set and the capabilities of the software they're using. Okay, let's keep going here. Let's talk about how we get to the design.
Okay, so here we have the adjusted block. And the first thing I did was I determined where that waist placement was going to be and what length adjustments needed to be done. So I took the front and the back waistbands and I drafted the lines where I was going to divide it. And I combined that waistband to the bodice and to the skirt, creating the pattern that you see in the middle. On the middle pattern there, I'm drafting in the design lines. And here's where I'm taking a little bit of length off at the waist of the bodice and on the skirt, just to compensate for the lengthwise stretch as well. From here, I'm building the pattern pieces and I'm creating the style pattern. And I do a little bit of smoothing and you know, cleaning up, making sure the pieces walk together, but then always making sure that I'm not losing any of the measurements at those core body locations. You know, I want to maintain that, you know, that back to the block to make sure that we're retaining that fit. All the while in this process, I'm always going back and looking at the pattern that was first developed in Clo and the style image, the 3D image in Clo. I'm referencing that to make sure that we're still keeping that style and not changing it. Liz,
Kim.
do you want to show how we transitioned or how we checked it?
Yeah, for sure. So you have the style pattern that Kim worked on the left, and then the pattern in the middle is the pattern that was exported out of Clo. And this is just a great opportunity for our team to gut check the changes that were made and kind of why we did choose to work from a balance block. So there's an overlay on the next animation that Chris will show you here. So reviewing it here, you can really see a lot of the asymmetry or areas that might not have been as balanced have been now corrected with the gray pattern. And that was just our best way to know that we were working from a balanced block that fit well. And so we felt really good about this, but that the initial shapes that we were going for are still registered in the newly created pattern.
Perfect. Thanks, you guys.
So now we have some more demo videos for you. We're going to show you more about arranging and simulating in all three softwares. We'll start with Clo, and then Kim's going to show you a little more about Browseware and OPTITEX. And so this video is about the arrangement points in Clo. It is kind of specific to this software, but it's you click the piece in the 2D window and you align them with the arrangement dots on the body. There's just a little visual of turning the sewing on to check that they've been placed on the correct side of the body. So it's just a short little clip. And now I'll hand it off to Kim to show you more about the simulating process in Browseware.
Okay, so this is a screenshot or a video clip of Browseware. And what you'll see here is I'm stitching the pieces together in the 2D window on the left. On the right is a 3D window where you can see the stitching happening in real time. And I'm just circling around the virtual Alvaform just to check the stitches, maybe adjust the placement a little bit of my pieces. When I adjust the back piece, the arrange window opens, and here's where you can see how the pieces were originally arranged around the avatar. Once the placement looks good, I'm gonna close that arrange window, and I'm gonna do a little bit more work on it because all of the outer edges I'm selecting for the bodice, and I'm adding what's called a force multiplier at a depth of 1/4 inch, and that's gonna duplicate what's gonna happen in real life in that seam when it's sewn by a 2-needle 4-thread serger and understitched. Then I'm also going to add a force multiplier of 2 layers and 1.5 inches to the hems, and that'll duplicate what's going to happen with a fold under hem. There you see it simulated, and then I'll just rotate it real quick and check it for placement and make sure everything simulated well. So that's in Browseware. And let's take a look at OPTITEX too. This is dressing and simulating in OPTITEX. And what I've done ahead of time in here is already stitched it together, and the pieces are placed around the virtual Alva form. And just like in Browseware, I'll quick do a twirl just to check my stitches. You're seeing some really unique colors on the design. That's not the finished colors. OPTITEX has a feature called Unique Colors that will help you just more clearly identify what the pieces are. So before I start simulating, I'm going to use a style tool, and it's called the pin manipulator. And I'll use that to hold the straps in place during simulation so that they don't slip off the body. And it's just going to be temporarily held there till I can simulate it and just check those finished results. And once it's finished, then I'm going to clear those pins, because sometimes it, holds it and will kind of twist the straps a little bit. So by clearing the pins out and then resimulating, it'll straighten it out a little bit more. So it's a style tool that's used to hold it there just until all the other pieces will hold it in place. Now I'm going to go over and apply the textures and the colors to the fabrics, which have already been set up in the shader manager, so that we can see the finished colors. The trick is to not overstyle. I only use one styling tool, and I could probably go in and do a little bit more adjusting, but I'm just trying to keep it as natural as possible. Just like putting a real sample on a dress form.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. I just have a question for you, because everybody, so Liz works in Clo and Browseware, and Kim works in OPTITEX and Browseware. And so share a little bit, you guys, about what happens when you're in one minute of the day, and then you're in another minute of the day.
Well, it's kind of like going from Mac to Windows.
Yeah.
For me, it's inches to centimeters, right? It's that confusing. But Liz?
Sure. Yeah. So when I work in Clo, there are different functions, but they both, virtually accomplish very similar things. And I find a lot of the shortcuts are different. So sometimes my fingers will remember one action from one software and then try to do it in the other one. So there's a little bit of a mental focus that you kind of have to get adjusted to as you switch. But yeah, I mean, both softwares are great and fun to work in. I'm sure, Kim, you have experienced similar things.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and these videos are great because it's a dressing and simulating. It's parts of that dressing simulating process in 3D. And you can see how different each software is, and they all have, great features about all of them. And, what also comes in is different user methods, right? Everyone, it's kind of like a pattern maker. Everybody pattern maker has their own methods, and different users have methods that they prefer as well. And it kind of drives one of the point home for as far as the standard goes. If you're choosing, and we understand that brands may choose more than one software, 3D software, for different purposes, but certainly having, all of your technical team users on one software can be really valuable and certainly efficient. So this is looking a little bit at the tools that we use. So, we have the fit form standard that's here. We have the block that's mapped to it. And we did our own testing of the fabric to really try to hone in on those pieces. Now we want to talk a little bit about establishing some standards for the 3D process in consistency. So we're just going to take a look at some of those guidelines on the next few slides here. And it more has to do with software settings as well. Kim, do you want to talk about this one with us?
Yes, this is something that I learned working in Browseware. And you might want to check this no matter what 3D software you're using to see if you have any settings for your avatars. We found one called Avatar Friction, and it was really helpful for us to locate this because our final product is going to be a sample that we're going to be placing on a real dress form that has a cotton linen cloth covering it. So with the avatar friction, you have the ability to adjust it to either plastic, human, or cloth. And what you're seeing in these images are the 3D simulations in all three of those friction settings. And you can see that it's a significant difference how it initially lays on the body. Now, no styling has been done here to hold straps in place or to adjust the bodice or anything. But it definitely does make a difference.
Yeah, so it's pretty important to think about, you know, how whatever software you're working in to understand where you can make those alignments or changes, and you would want to make sure that your team is calibrated on what they're looking at. And of course, as Kim mentioned, if reviewing the garment is compared on a physical alva form or a fit form, you want to think about altering that avatar friction to cloth for that reason. Okay, Liz, let's talk about balance lines.
Yeah, so this is just another way to calibrate, and it's really in your arrangement. So if Chris, you'd play the video. So this is all about how to set up your pattern pieces in the 3D space before you simulate. So I was locating the balance lines on the pattern and also the landmarks on the body and aligning that center front line. Here I'm picking up the skirt and aligning to the waist, and I'm doing this all around the body. The sewing lines are visible here, so you can see what's level and what's not. You can see the back is very uneven to start. So moving that back panel into place and shifting the skirt upward to the waist and making sure that both panels are equidistant from the center back line. There was a little collision there with the back seat, so just pulling that pattern piece away and doing a 360 view just to check that everything is correct. You can simulate here. And the center front line at the bodice did pull away a little bit at the bust. So here I'm just pinching the fabric and trying to still keep it natural and realistic, but get the center front line more straight. And it's a little tough to see on the video, but now I'm aligning the balance lines of the high hip and the low hip to the form lines. And this is just a really great way to make sure that if you are taking length landmarks or looking at just overall fit, that your fabric is not aligned in the incorrect spot. So picking that up and making sure the fabric is smooth. I think there were a couple wrinkles there that I pinched out. And in Clo, there is a high definition setting that you turn on to just see more of the accurate fabric reaction, and one final simulation. And then here is your finished visual.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Liz.
No, that's okay. We're going to hand it off to Kim now, just to talk a little bit more about the advanced styling tools and browseware.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, here you go.
Sure. So like I said before, I like to use as few styling tools as possible. But just like if I was putting this on a dress form, I'd want to reach in there and I'd want to adjust and smooth, you know, and make sure everything's laying in place. So I'm using the pinch tool, and I have the radius at about 50%, just kind of moving the bodice area around until it lays in the place that I want. And you can hold it and fix it in place too. And so I'm going to fix it in place kind of right over the bust area before I re-simulate. And then I'm going to use that same pinch tool to adjust the straps, kind of pull them in a little bit more on both the front and the back. And it's kind of dynamic where, you know, when I move it in one area, if I don't hold it and I start moving in another area, it's going to kind of fall naturally into place unless you hold it. So once I have the bodice arranged the way I like it, I want to be able to reach in there and tug on the skirt and pull it down just like you would in real life. So I am using the brush tool around the waist, and I'm holding it in place just so that I don't mess up the bodice area that I already fixed. And then I can reach in there with that styling tool and tug and pull just like you would in real life, and re-simulate it to get it to lay as close as possible. One of the things with using these tools is what's happened in this instance is the left bodice can now be seen through on the right bodice. So I'm going to take off the hold on that styling tool, and then I'm going to use that pinch tool again just to kind of nudge it a little bit and see if that will go away. That's one way of fixing that. Here I'm taking a snapshot of that simulation so I can save it, that first simulation.
Kim, is there any way to be proactive about maybe the way the pieces were arranged so that that little adjustment you have to make could be eliminated?
Oh, sure. Yeah. In Browseware, it's called adjusting the grid. And the grid has to do with every fabric is made out of triangles. And adjusting the grid, you're making that triangle size smaller and you're capturing more detail. And a lot of times on the smaller pieces, like the facings, the straps, and those, you could adjust the grid in advance. And that way it's going to be less likely to collide. In OPTITEX in 3D, it's called resolution. And same kind of purpose, you know, with adjusting the triangle size. What I've noticed in OPTITEX is they automatically, for a smaller piece, they will put a lower number or a higher number, giving it a resolution off the bat. That's, you know, probably going to give you a better simulation to start with before you have to go in and adjust it yourself. I think
and
that also, right?
That's what I was going to ask.
I was gonna say for Clo, it's called particle distance. So you might be familiar with that. If you do a lower particle distance number, it'll just make the fabric mesh a little tighter. Yeah, so preventing that collision.
One thing I have noticed with, you know, adjusting the grid or the resolution, it does slow things down. Your file size gets a little bit bigger. So if it's something that you're going to do, I usually will simulate it first, and then when I get it as close as possible, at the end, I'll go in and adjust the resolution and simulate it, just to not slow things down.
Yeah, you know, these are all just great examples of, you know, the complexities of working in 3D and all the things that you really have to think about to ensure that you're trying to track that, you know, what the final output is going to be at the end. So thanks you guys so much. Let's continuing to talk about tools and then just thinking about, you know, again, going back. Liz.
Yeah, so once we had that first iteration of the pattern that was created from the block, we brought it back into the 3D space right next to the original design and just kind of took a couple on-body landmarks and looked at the design overall to make sure that it was encompassing what we were going for. So if you could go to the next slide, Chris. We took the front neck drop, just a gut check that that was in a relatively similar spot to the original. And you can see that some of the unbalanced or unsewn areas that might not have had care before are now trued up and balanced. And then we also did slit length from the floor and hem length, and just in general reviewed a lot of those body landmarks from original to the balanced pattern.
Yeah, so that's another great kind of a process that you can think about when you're thinking about standardizing or calibrating your team, understanding the certain landmarks and how you want to use that and take them. Okay, Kim, let's talk a little bit about checking ease.
Sure. What we're looking at here on the left is I have changed the view of the 3D simulation now using a function called springs. And this kind of goes back to talking about resolution and grid. Here's where you can see those little triangles. And I'll put it on the spring setting, and this is in OPTITEX, so that I can see through the fabric and I can see where it's sitting on the body and just kind of check placement. And then I'll use the tension map, which you see on the right, to check for the stretch of the fabric and see that it's also stretching in the areas that I want it to. And this tension map will measure the stretch for the warp and the weft, and then the deformation also. And those little red areas, the deformation is going to be like the red orange areas, and that's where the garment is getting too tight. So looking at a tension map, you can tell if you're stretching your fabric too much and if you need to go in and do a pattern revision.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so the next part of this, you know, we're taking all of these steps along the way. And at this point, know that have only been working in 3D. We haven't asked for a physical sample to do a final check. But the next step, of course, is for checking movement. And we're using the different poses in the virtual alba forms. And this is the realistic version of the alba form. What we've seen through the process here, you've seen us using the mannequin version, the human-like version, and now this is the realistic version. And the virtual alba forms are a replica of the actual alba form geometry. So you can, all three of those different types of virtual alba forms are developed, and they have been developed in these various poses, but making sure that the muscle mass and the body deformation are anatomically correct. And that's really important when you're trying to get a gut check from movement. So at this point, we've used as many of the tools that we can in 3D to evaluate, and we feel like we're in a really good spot for our sample here. And so now it's time to think about validating it in a physical sample and the next steps moving out of 3D into the physical sample. Kim, do you want to talk to us about this one?
Yes. We realized that in all three softwares, you can also do the 2D pattern work as well. But one thing that we did is we took this pattern back into OPTITEX, into the 2D workspace, and we prepared it for production. And so we created a pattern piece for every single piece that needs to be cut. So we created the lining pieces, the facing pieces, the interlining pieces. And then we added the seam allowances, put notches in the strategic points where they need to be, added drill marks. And, the seam allowance, even just looking at the skirts, you can see that's kind of a custom function. It's not just a blanket function where we can go in and just add 1/4 of an inch across the board. It really has to be considered for whatever seam type is going to be used to join those pieces together. So that was one extra step that we took after we had validated what we thought was the best fit in 3D and before we sent it off to the sample maker.
Okay. So then, we did send it to the sample maker, and this is just a visual of the 3D sample on the actual alba form. We're looking at that compared to what we saw in 3D. So we would consider this certainly an authenticated block or an authenticated style relating back and having been validated in the physical sample. And we want to say that, we did this with just creating one fit sample, which, is a far cry from what you might have done in the past with multiple fit samples. And the methods we used integrated fundamental tools and traditional pattern making skills with 3D technology. So this authenticated garment then becomes something that you can add into your digital library, and it can be leveraged then as a trusted base for fit in creating new variations of the style, whether it's about colors or fabrics, modifications to the original style, or maybe as a jump point to a completely new design. So at this point, the core size is validated and authenticated from the digital to the actual 3D sample. So the next part of what we want to talk about, and the last phase of work that we did, was also the grade validation. And again, here we're now using the size set of the LTA women, the Alvanon Standard Series LTA women in sizes 34 to 48. And we did use the 3D process in order to look at the garment grade validation. The beauty of having your size set created from your core size body is that it alleviates the difficulty of searching for fit models in the range of sizes. How many people have done that, right? Where you're trying to do a full size set run and you have to worry about finding the exact shape or very close in order to really do a true technical fit assessment of how the grade's performing, right? Here you have all the sizes that are symmetrical in the appropriate proportion, size, and shape for the demographic coming from the core size. So it's controlling that subjectivity in the technical process. And this isn't discounting using live models, because we know live models are necessary for functionality and comfort, and especially depending on the product you might use. So without talking any more about that, let's take a look at how you use this tool in 3D, Kim, for taking a look at the grading?
Sure. We use Browseware to validate the grade in the size set because that had the function where we could bring in our size set of avatars and set up the size range in advance. And then you work on your core size and you bring in the pieces and you place them around the avatar, you stitch it, you put all of your seams on it, your materials and everything just in the core size. You simulate it and then do a snapshot and then that's there. That's going to stay there in the software. And then you go into your size set settings and you switch to the next size. And automatically it's going to switch to the next size avatar and it's going to place the pieces around the avatar. And you may have to do a little bit of tweaking. You may have to go in and move pieces up and down a little bit or in or out away from the form. And then you can simulate it in each size. We were also able to do it. We did validate the grade also in OPTITEX, but we had to do each size separately. What you're seeing in this image is after we did our first size set in Browseware and we looked at all the image, we could see that there was a difference. You see the blue line at the hem. That was the first obvious thing that we saw, is that our hems were not even and it looked like they were all pinching up in the back a little bit. So I went back to the core size, and if you look at the screenshot on the far right hand side, it shows that what I did is I took my front pieces and I raised them up a little bit, and then my back pieces and I brought them down, just kind of counteracting, you know, what we were seeing in that, and then simulated it, and we were able to fix that as far as the piece placement goes.
Perfect. Thanks, Kim. So let's take a look back at, a standard, a standard that we saw a video of. Liz, if you want to talk a little bit about the alignment with body landmarks using it here.
Yeah, so after we dressed the size set, we looked, this is a little glimpse of a jump size set, the smallest, the 34, the core 38, and the largest 48, where we used transparent views just to check the waist, high hip, low hip landmarks, just to tie back to what Kim was saying, where it was hiking before, and altering that method just got us even closer to hitting the landmarks that we needed. But this also gave us an opportunity to check the grade and adjust anything that we needed before we did sample.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead, Kim.
This is looking at the size set, the finished review of the front view. And we also have on the next slide, we have the side view and the back view. So we can line them up and compare them all next to each other.
Yeah, and so at this point, then we did also ask for physical samples to be made of the 34 and the 48, the smallest and the largest. We requested them to take that step in doing the grade validation part. And this, again, this is only the one sample that we've looked at. Overall, the result is very similar to what we saw in 3D. Would require some further evaluation, taking into consideration the additional variables of the fabric, the actual fabric in the garment versus the virtual, even though we got a good result in that in the core size. So maybe the grading needs tweaked, but then you also have cutting and sewing and the result of the samples received. Kim or Liz, do you have anything that you want to add to this one?
Well,
sure.
I would also
go ahead, Kim. I was just going to say, yeah, definitely bouncing off of Chris, taking into account how the sample's measured for tolerance and not making a decision based on maybe if something had a little bit of handling taken in, but just going off of the actual measurements that we were trying to achieve. Kim?
First thing that I notice when I look at this is I go, oh, wow, you had the fabric tested and look at the color difference. But it's another example of calibration on your team. When you're working in 3D, lighting is a whole nother issue that we're not really even getting into in this presentation. Lighting when you're taking those 3D images and then lighting in photography. So you're going to get differences.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, boy, we are just about at the end here. We have one more slide to go through, and this is really just leaving you with some thoughts, as far as where you might be and how 3D actually fits into your product development process. Of course, that's a big consideration. And who will be using it? Will it be only design? Will it be design, technical, and maybe marketing or another group? And are they all using it separately? We're talking about this more from a technical toolkit kind of a consideration. And so there's just a little checklist to leave you with, things that you want to consider in getting started there. The software, deciding which is best suited for your development process. Are you going to use one? Are you going to use multiple? We know a lot of brands that do use different softwares depending on what their needs are. Fit standard, absolutely. Is your 3D avatar and your fit form standard the same? It's so important that you understand any measurement shape differences between your avatar, your fit form, and your live model. That's really critical for that fit consistency. Blocks, what is your style development starting point? And what does blocks mean for you and your brand? Using blocks that are mapped to your fit standard provides the best start point for consistent fit for sure. And the fabric. What is your process for selecting the fabric? Are you going to choose from existing fabric libraries, of which there are great resources out there, or are you going to create your own 3D library of tested fabrics? Anything you guys, Kim, Liz, that you want to add, and just other things that I might have missed in the top section here? Pretty good? Okay.
Yeah, good for my end.
Okay, so let's talk here about establishing standards for technical consistency, pre-simulation placement. Kim or Liz, one of you want to take that one? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, just going back to making sure that your patterns are kind of aligned to standard landmarks in the 3D space. It can just save you time if you set up your patterns ahead of time with those landmarks, and just prevent you from having to do over styling.
Maybe a little bit about software settings, Kim. Things to think about.
We talked a little bit about avatar friction. There's lots of different things that you're going to dig into in the 3 different softwares, and just coming together so that you are all on a level, playing field when you go into the 3D development.
How about construction details?
I can go and address that one also.
Yeah.
Establishing guidelines, edge finishes, multiple layers, seam allowances, just kind of having all of those things in place and a starting point where everybody can work from. Every design is going to have different requirements when you're rendering in 3D, but having that starting point is going to be extremely helpful.
And it's probably, in the same way that you have a tech pack outlining for what you want the vendor to think about, it's the same thing in 3D, right? For you working through that process of looking at it and sewing it and looking at it. So that makes sense. Liz, you want to talk about styling?
Sure. So just going back to those body landmarks, something I actually didn't mention earlier is with the pre-simulation placement, we also needed to mention making sure that your pattern pieces are not colliding with the avatar, that they're level front to back, or maybe you do need to think about the front being more vertical and the back being a little lower. But just training your users on all of those kind of areas that you're going to make decisions for, making sure that everybody's doing it the same way.
Yeah, and using the software specific styling tools in the same way that you might adjust a garment on the fit form. Kim, definitely, we actually were both talking about that, about keeping it in a natural state, not over styling it. The last point is, not to force a perfect visual. You really do want it the same way that you would dress a fit form, the same way that you would put it on. Those simple adjustments starting there. Okay, that is what we have for you today. And I believe we are actually a little bit over. So I think we'll have to answer your questions in chat. Sorry, you guys.
That was so fantastic. And in the chat, you'll see when you actually get to reading all of it, everybody has really positive feedback about like all of the work that you actually did. And so I'm so happy that we managed to end today with a technical presentation, because, you know, it's very easy for kind of people like me, you know, who don't actually do the physical work, who actually really, you definitely don't want me cutting anything. To actually misunderstand sometimes kind of the amount and the sheer amount of work and kind of surgical precision that you actually need to do in order to do all of the things that you know, to make a garment. And I think a lot of the times we undervalue the amount of time and the amount of experience and the amount of, you know, kind of trial and error that it takes to do something that was actually which is a dress that looks actually relatively simple, right? It's not got like 10,000 different pieces on here. It's relatively simple, but yet there are a lot of things that you actually have to do using different tools. And a lot of those expectations you have all set. And I think it's been really interesting for everybody today. We've done 5 hours of 3D programming.
It's been a fun day.
5 hours. And you know, we started with Jamie Dunbar, right? Her talking about her team and all of the choices that they have to make and the amount of empowerment that she has to give to everybody, you know, in her team to actually make these minuscule kind of adjustments and actually kind of work through all of the things that come out and still have a very maybe kind of scientific methodology to a certain extent, which you all 3 of you have gone through to make this one garment. And I do know how much time it took you to do this. So yes. So I want to
It's been a great study and learning, you know, about using the different software that we have. You know, we're so grateful to be able to work in, for sure, and all the learnings that we're having for our own trust level in using 3D in block development.
Yeah, and you know, I think the key things is in your last technical presentation, you've also covered a lot of things that we actually covered throughout the day, right? So we've got the things that we talked about and a little bit about, you know, how the soft avatars and actually why we have to go down through those kinds of processes. You're really seeing a lot of the tension maps that actually we're seeing in all of the softwares. Then you covered kind of the digital materials as well, you know, and how all of those various things would kind of the calibration is actually very key in what we do. And then we went through both of the different softwares. And you've also taken some of the we also talked a little bit about kind of what you do when you're actually a smaller player, right? When you don't maybe not have some of the resources that is there to be able to, you know, to have a fully fledged team to actually work on things. And so I think today's been one of those days where if you are still with us, all 250 of you, thank you very much. To sit through 5 hours of programming, we just want to thank you. And Kathy is here to talk a little bit about kind of the motif side and how you can leverage all of the different courses that we've got and continue your learning. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for attending, joining us today. Boy, this was an incredible day. What I loved about it was we really got into the practicalities of implementing 3D, and we started the day with, we heard case studies throughout the day, and then we got into the tools and showcasing all these new tools. We saw the cool demo from Zoic Labs. You know, we got the case studies from Under Armour and Eric Lee of Unified 3D, and then of course all the software tools, the digital fabric tools. So wow, what an incredible day. One of the things I think that came through for me, it was mentioned several times, is how difficult 3D implementation can be and how change management is such an important part of it. So I have to mention, you know, Motif is listening to you. We're listening to what courses you want, what we can, the education we can bring for you, and we go out and find the experts to teach them. So we have a whole masterclass on change management that's coming up in the spring. It's open for registration now. It's a 4-hour in-depth masterclass, so you can register for that now. It's on our site. Of course, we have our 3D transformation course that's great for any company starting out and looking for more help on how to roll out pilots and get stakeholder buy-in. And then, of course, we do have our CLO 3D software bundles, beginner, advanced, beginner, intermediate, and advanced, taught by super users. And then we have our brand new browseware for creative design that's launching November. That's open for pre-sale now. You get 20% off if you buy today. We also have, we have a special promo, it's put in the chat, but if you use the words 3D Tech Fest, you get 10% off of anything, any of our courses on the platform. So we hope you'll join us. We also have our learning series. We've got a lot of free events and resources. And then we have some more in-depth ones if you're looking for certification or company training. So thank you for joining us today.
And for all of you who are teams, remember, you have to go ask your corporate leadership to actually talk to us about doing hybrid training and, you know, things that are particularly done for your company. And look, for us, this has been a labor of love to do not only the events, but also bring in all of the, you know, these phenomenal speakers and actually also create these courses for you. And everybody who works in education has a real passion for education. So we want you to feedback to us, to tell us exactly what you want to learn about. There's a feedback form in the chat. And actually, we're going to see you tomorrow. So we will remind you of all of this tomorrow.
And we have another great day tomorrow. Tomorrow's the fun stuff, the metaverse. This is going to be great, great speakers.
Yeah, all the stuff I don't know about. So I get to learn a ton. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Have a wonderful day, wonderful night.